So, in Ekurhuleni, the Chief Whip, Khetha Shandu, and Ward Councillor Pieter Henning have resigned from their roles. This was revealed during a sitting today, which was marked by disruptions and political tension. The council's former whip then, Khetha Shandu, is with us tonight to talk more about his departure. A very good evening to you, sir. Were you jumping? Was it a case of jumping before you were pushed?
No, definitely not. Let me just first, before I answer that question, first I would like to greet you and the viewers at home. Secondly, I would like to send my word of gratitude to all the people who've contacted me today and wished me well, and those who sent their kind words through social media and other platforms as well. I appreciate them. Thank you very much on that. On the matter that is on the table, whether jump before being pushed, I can assure you it wasn't the case. The decision I've made it almost 2 weeks ago, and as things progress, I realized that it will be unfair of me to ask councillors to sit in council chamber and defend me, and then the following day, and then I tender my resignation. So I decided that it will be best that I serve the council the chaos and be able and resign before the day.
Mm. You made the decision, you say, about 2 weeks ago. So why not resign 2 weeks ago?
There were still other things that I needed to wrap up as a person as well, and including the work of council itself. So at the time, I thought it was prudent for me to stay the course and make sure that I can be able to wrap out those things up, including the last municipal party that we had yesterday, because we taking into account the shape of the council meeting that we had last week and the one that they are having today. It was important for me to then have a word with the municipal party yesterday and make sure that we can try and find each other so that we make sure that there is a smooth running of council today, to make sure that the items of compliance that are important in council are being passed through and be able to, so that the resident of Ekurhuleni can be able to service deliver. And
do you think that mission has succeeded? Because even today we're hearing it's been much of the same chaotic sort of sitting.
I have not been privy on what is happening in the council chamber, taking into account that I'm no longer a councillor. But when we had a discussion with the multi-party yesterday, there were some sort of conclusion and the will of course, moving forward with the items that were important. But of course, sometimes the events of the day can make people change their minds. I'm no longer in control of that. But the one that we had yesterday, even though it was a 2-hour-and-a-half meeting that we had, the longest that we have in a very, very long time, but we were able to find each other in key issues.
What do you mean you were able to find each other on key issues, and what were those issues where you were able to find each other?
Well, firstly, we all condemn the violence that happened last week. It's not the first time, and you will remember that in March last year, we had some similar incident, and as the multi-party, we sat together and said, this is wrong, and after that, we were able to identify councillors who were under wrong, and then we sent them to the ethics so that corrective measures can be taken place. So I did remind of them that yesterday, because we, as a city, we do have our own culture to say, this is how we want the image of the city to be portrayed. For the longest time, we try to do things in an orderly manner, even if we are not agreeing on certain things, but throwing chairs and other things with each other is not our culture.
Mm. Where do you think it went wrong for the DA-led coalition in Ekurhuleni? Because the last time the mayor, Tanya Campbell, made a return, basically managed to survive only because the marriage between the ANC and the EFF, the terms of that marriage had not been ironed out and there was a fallout. But otherwise, your section was already on its way out a good 6 months ago.
Firstly, let's put it like this. The coalition in Ekurhuleni, the outer was part of, was always a minority from one side. We never had a majority. Of course, other parties voted with us at the time. And it was important for me as a whip of council just to make sure that the relationship between the parties in council and then is a strong bond to make sure that we do not have those chaotic scenes. And at some point, we were trailblazing as a city because we were surpassing the other metros in Gauteng. We were the first to have our state of the city, passing our budget and do all those things. So we were trailblazing, and I think it was a very, very good success when coming to that. And of course, as time progresses, people will have different views and different interests as well. So that is understandable, and it was always understood from our point of view that if such a time arrives, there is always a possibility that you will have to move to a different seat, but still remain in council, of course.
Well, the ANC and its allies in the Ekurhuleni Council say what you do is you talk a good game and you're not telling the truth. So what you say and the experience of the people of Ekurhuleni is not the same. And they say you've in fact done a dreadful job running the metro, that basic services have all but collapsed or not even been delivered to many communities, and that it's only fitting that through your departure, only then will things get better for the people of Ekurhuleni. How do you respond?
That's very much incorrect. Remember, the whip of council is an anchor in council between the legislature, executive, and the council itself. But it is not responsible for service delivery. The service delivery is purely the responsibility of the executive. You must remember that Ekurhuleni is using the separation of power system of government. And therefore, once the mayor has announced the executive, then they take hold of the administration and make sure that service delivery happens. That's the first thing. And then, of course, then legislation, then they play the role of an oversight. However, it is important also to mention that you'll remember that the election 2021 happened on the 1st of November, and we were still in the middle of the COVID, and a lot of municipalities, including the national government, of course, had spent money on the state of disaster. So the city didn't have enough budget at the time just to carry its mandate. So the city was almost in hibernation for 6 months. We had to do what we believe was important. And of course, some of service delivery will have to take a step back. But once the budget was passed, and which was happened last year in May, and then of course on the 1st of July when it kicks in, that's where a lot of services then started happening. But there were also a lot of issues about procurement that I have noticed, and when I asked the executive, of course, to get explanation on why other things were not happening, then there were a lot of issues about procurement, because during the time when there were no procurement, a lot of contracts had lapsed, and now they needed to be renewed. And in order to go through a tender system alone, it could take quite some time on its own. And that included, as far as I know, part of the tenders that were the supply of tar, which had an impact on the patching of potholes. But as I left the office, I realized that the patching of potholes was on the high, particularly on main roads. But of course, if you are living in your, of course, suburban area, you will still find out that in these residential roads were still not patched, but main roads were being patched just to relieve the congestion. What
would you say then that you can point to today that anyone in Ekurhuleni can go and look and see as fact, as a difference that you made as the now former whip? What did you do with your time in office that we can all point to and see as a change for the good in Ekurhuleni?
There are a lot of things that I have done as a whip of council. Firstly, the first task that I had to do was to, of course, establish the office of the whip of council. You remember that in the previous term, it remained as the office of the chief whip of the majority. But when the act changed on the 1st of November, then that office had to be changed and be independent, because it's now an office of the council. So I had to make sure that that office remained the office of council and is accessible to all political parties. And in so doing, we were able to do a lot of work together as political parties. And one of the issues that we had to deal with was, of course, a lot of ESCOM supply areas that did not have electricity. And through negotiation between the ESCOM team and the community members, we were able to find a solution, probably about people having to pay 6,500 fines because they've been not connected correctly. So we had similar issues as well, and because of that, a lot of transformers were blown and they were not replaced. So through that negotiation, a lot of transformers were replaced, and we worked very well together with the team from ESCOM as well as the resident, particularly in Katlehong, Phosphorus, as well as Tutuza. As well, we also had issues, of course, of some of these areas, complaints flaring up in other areas like Boksburg and Kempton Park, Alberton as well. I had a lot of meetings and stakeholder meetings with residents in those areas to try and make sure that we resolve the tensions, either between the councillor and the resident, or the resident and the municipality itself. Because I had a zero tolerance in terms of that I do not want any councillor's house to be burnt down.
So those are communities that will be able to vouch for you. Just lastly, there was a report out today that Action SA is now saying, in fact, that the mayor of Ekurhuleni, Tanya Campbell, and the MMC should resign for failing to deliver services to the people of Ekurhuleni adequately. Are they right, as Action SA, to make that call?
Well, of course, I cannot speak for Action SA and their views.
Do you agree with the call?
No, I do not. I do think that a lot of services can still be achieved. The only thing that needs to be ironed out, of course, is the tension in council itself. If that is ironed correctly, then a lot of services can still be delivered.
Khetha Shandu, now former council whip in Ekurhuleni. Good to have your time, so thank you very much for being on News at Prime tonight.